also at 14th, 16th, 18th, and 20th Streets. An elevator at 16th Streets is just one feature that also makes the High Line. It's extraordinary.
Welcome to another episode of Spark the Brain podcast. I'm here with my co-host Kofi. Today we have a very, very special guest. Oh man, who we got today?
So today we have the co-founder of the High Line and a pivotal person for me personally as well. So very thankful to have Robert Hammond here. So yeah, I guess I'll start off with, what was your process with starting the High Line actually? Like, did you just wake up one day and was like, you know what, I just want to create something like Legos?
No. Well, I liked playing with Legos when I was a kid. I did like building things, but in my 20s, I wanted to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to start a business. I wanted to be successful in business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was a history major in college, which is not business oriented, but I moved to New York, actually couldn't get a job for a year, and took a job working at Ernst & Young. It's like an accounting firm, hated it, quit, and then started working in small startups in the 90s. And so that's what I wanted to do. I was working for people, and then I thought, I'll start my own small business. And it was during like the .com, the first internet boom. And it was a time where young people were like starting stuff. And I lived in the West Village, which this is probably the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
It was a cheap neighborhood in Manhattan.
Wow.
The West Village, I got 2 months free rent.
What?
And I paid for a big apartment with an outdoor terrace. I paid $800.
Oh,
Man,
man,
so,
wrong.
I know.
That's the lottery right
I know. But the bad news is I rented for 20 years, so I didn't buy an apartment in this neighborhood, which I shouldn't have. But so then I read an article in the New York Times that they were going to tear this thing down, and I'd just seen it from the street.
Oh,
this old. It didn't really have a name because there used a bar. I think it's still there called Automatic Slims across from the West Bath.
Yeah.
And they had a picture of the old train. So then I knew there's a train went on it. And they said it was going to be demolished. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I could like volunteer and help out. But I asked around, no one was doing anything. So I went to a community board meeting. And I'd never been to a community board meeting. It was actually at Penn South. Next to Hudson Guild. And I sat next to another guy, and he was the only other guy interested in it. Everybody else just wanted to tear the thing down. And so I said, well, why don't you do something and I'll help? And he said, no, you do something and I'll help.
Okay.
And so it was, this is, again, how long ago it was, we exchanged business cards.
Okay.
And said, well, maybe we'll do something together. And so that was it was just like, it wasn't like a big plan. It was more, at the beginning, it was just sort of like a hobby. And Joshua, the other co-founder, was a travel writer. And I was a history major that was in like doing marketing, in internet startups. So we had no experience in this.
So you didn't know it was going to turn out. Wow.
No, nothing. A lot of times they say you have to have a vision.
Yeah.
For what you want. And that was the interesting thing is Josh and I didn't have, because we weren't architects, we weren't designers, we weren't city planners. So we just thought, maybe you shouldn't tear it down. But we didn't know what it should be.
Gotcha.
And we never been up there. And so then we asked permission from the railroad that owned it to go up there. We went up there, and there was like a mile and a half. This was in the summer of '99, and there was a mile and a half of wildflowers, right in the middle of the city. And so that was special.
When we were kids, we used to go up there and just run around.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have been up there, but we just did it just for fun.
Yeah.
We was curious, and that's exactly what was up there. Okay.
And so, but again, we didn't know, we were like, this is beautiful, but we also knew you just couldn't, it was hard, it was 3 stories up, there was no stair, it was hard to get up.
Yeah.
And like, we just thought, let's have people decide what it should be. So again, that's what's sort of different is we didn't envision this. I mean, we thought maybe you could put buildings up there, maybe you put art, maybe we didn't, and we knew pretty quickly you couldn't just put a path on what was there because there was asbestos, it was leaking. I mean, we could tell that like you couldn't just walk on what was there. Like,
not
it
at
just
all.
wouldn't get you
It would have
dangerous.
been safe.
Yeah. So so that's how we started. I didn't want it to be a career.
Yeah.
I never even thought about it. I didn't even think that was a career. So that's no grand plan.
Okay. So tell us about that process. You get up there, you seeing this, beautiful green lands. I know it's really green up here.
Yeah.
What was the next step? Like, do I have to start reaching out to my contacts to see what we should do, how we should design it?
Yep. Yeah, so the first thing we did is, since Josh and I didn't have any experience or expertise in this, we thought, and we both had other jobs.
Yeah.
We're like, let's find another group that can do this.
Okay.
So we met with architecture groups, preservation groups, civic groups, and they were like, this is a really dumb idea. Like, it's never going to happen.
Wow.
Like, you don't even know what you want to do up there. You don't have any money. You don't own it. The mayor wants to tear it down. The property owners want to tear it down. No one in the community cares.
Wow.
But we cared, and we were interested in it, and we did find some people that cared. So we started this group, Friends of the Highline, as a nonprofit. And our first goal was just to like find other people to help us because we didn't have any expertise. And in some ways, that was the secret of the success, is because we weren't experts, we had to go find experts in a whole bunch of different fields, like political experts, real estate experts, architects experts, city planning experts. We found these sort of people that came to help us, give us all of this advice. And then we each did the thing we did know how to do. Josh was a travel writer.
Okay.
So he went and tried to get press about it. He wrote stories about it. So he used that skill. My skill was more in marketing. So what I did is I went to a graphic designer and said, we need a logo. Because that's what I knew how.
Gotcha.
You know, that's
before anything's up.
This is before
create the
anything,
logo.
yeah, in
Okay.
'99. So 25 years ago, almost. It'll be 25 years in the fall. So this woman Paula Scheer, this sort of famous graphic designer, designed that H train track logo for us. And one time, one of our opponent, or Mayor Giuliani, said, because he was an opponent, he wanted to tear it down. He was bad.
Okay.
He wasn't as bad then, but he was still bad then.
Yeah.
And he said it's the Highline. All it is two guys with a logo, which turned out to actually not.
Was he saying that like in the press just to get? People not to...
It was at a hearing. Okay. Yeah, and it was basically just saying this thing is a joke. And to his defense, I don't want to defend Giuliani, but it was two guys.
Yeah.
I was 29. Josh was in his early 30s.
Yeah.
No plan, no money, no ownership.
From the outside,
no vision. It didn't.
Like
I mean, my mother asked me. It wasn't my job, but I was spending a lot of time on it. And she said, "Well, what are the chances of this happening?" So, I'm a dreamer, but I'm also a realist. I'm not.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Well, it's like 1 in 100." She was like, "Okay." You know. I think she was glad it wasn't my job at the time. But so it was it's hard to imagine now because it's so successful.
Yeah.
But at the time, again, it wasn't even called the Highline. It was called the West Side Elevated Rail Viaduct.
Wow.
And
That's
so
very long.
Yeah, not very, it doesn't come off your...
Yeah, I want to go there.
Yeah, I want to do that.
Scary.
And so the Highline was the nickname, and so that's what we started using, because the Highline sound... My mother actually told me, she said something, because she liked flying kites, and she said, it's hard to have bad thoughts when you look up. Like, you're happier. You know, and you realize that when you look down...
Yeah, it's more negative.
It's more negative.
Yeah.
And so, high... I mean, there's a whole bunch of connotations to high, but also looking up. And the thing is, high in the sky. It's a...
And friends on top of that.
Yeah, friends. It just sounds like... and so, we didn't really know it was going to be such a good name, but we knew it was better than West Side Elevated Rail Viaduct.
And how did you stay confident, with not having certain things in order? Because, me, I suffer with thinking about outcome a lot with certain things.
Yeah.
Where if I hear something negative while thinking about outcome, like, I don't know, maybe I can't. How did you stay in that mindset of like, this? I'm gonna just do this.
Yeah. So there was 3 things that I realize now helped. I was good at sales. I learned sales, not in college, but I had a sales job once, and I had to call people that ran hotels and ask them to put our catalog in their hotel. So it was like a lot of cold calling when you actually used like a real phone, and you would call and people would just reject you, And so I started this game where I wouldn't let myself go home until I had a certain number of rejections. So I had rejection goals instead of sales goals. And so it was just freeing. I would just dial quick. Hello, this is Robert. And, they'd hang up, dial, instead of getting caught up with, oh God, they hate that, And you realize it's a really, I was single then into my 20s, and then I also just started using that when I went out. Like, instead of, like, if I saw somebody and I was interested, waiting them to look at me, I would just go up and ask them if they wanted a beer. Instead of, and if they said no, just walk away and, And so that just taught me that rejection, you never get, even if you're in sales, no one likes rejection. But you get used to it and you realize that's not the point. The point is the few people that say, so that was one. Being good at sales helped.
Like that.
It wasn't my full-time job. It wasn't my career. It was like a hobby. It's like, if you take up pottery, are you really upset when you're trying to make a bowl and it falls apart? You don't care, because you go to it's not paying your bills. It's not, really what you're judged on. It's your hobby. Or, you might be sad you're bad at basketball, but you go to work the next day and you still get a paycheck. It doesn't not that serious. If you're bad, I don't know, any like painter or something. And so that helped. And then I also read a lot of self-help books in my 20s.
What was your favorite one?
There was this one woman, Louise Hay, and we would say these affirmations. And I would listen to affirmations and so it was sort of helping me think about just beyond what you normally think you can do. And so it became sort of a voice in my head and just reading all the books, you can do it, try it, just try things. So those things together, I think helped me get over and I always thought it was going to sort of fail. And so every year I'd say, is this worth it for me? Joshua was much more altruistic. So I think Joshua cared more about the Highline than himself. Or I always was more selfish and care. So I always would sort of think, even because we started doing it more and more. And so I'd always make a calculus, sort of is this good for my career even if it doesn't happen? And as it started gaining speed, I realized I was getting to meet all these people I'd never get to meet, in my early 30s. I was learning a lot about all these things I did. So I figured even if it didn't happen, I was meeting people that could give me jobs. I was developing a more interesting resume than just working at startups. And the other thing is I just liked it more. I liked working at a nonprofit more than I liked working at these small startups.
Yeah. How did you get to what's the process of raising money, raising capital for us, a project like this?
Yeah, that's probably the most important thing, whether it's a small nonprofit or a big nonprofit. And it's the same with businesses. It's the money. That's the key.
Yeah.
And so that's again where sales helped, because sales is selling things. In this case, in some ways it was easier because you're not selling yourself. You're not saying give money to me. You're saying give money to this idea. And so I just, in the beginning, it was just asking my friends, $50, $100. Wow. I used to have a lot of parties because my apartment had a big terrace. And so I used to just have parties, and at that time you could still get a keg. No one has keg parties.
I don't know, but
I know, we get a
I know
can,
what
we
it
put
is,
it
yeah.
outside. It's like a thing with beer,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's cheaper than buying cans. I don't know, so I would do that. And so when I started the Highline, then I just started charging people
Ooh,
to come to
okay.
the party and say, it's a
Okay.
fundraiser.
Yeah.
You know, and it's free drinks. I mean, but you have to pay to get in. So we started doing that, and then it started growing, and then it was like friends of friends, and then in the beginning we didn't need very much money because we got a free logo. We had to pay for a brochure, you know.
Mhm.
And at this time, again, this was so long ago. Google was 2 years old when we started.
I was about to say.
So like the internet was like new
Mhm.
still. Like Joshua put up flyers.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
like on
Yeah.
poll. Like that's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
people
yeah.
did
That's
to get
what
the
people
word
did
out. To get
marketing.
people to go to a community meeting, that's
Yeah.
how you did it. And we started an email group, which you're like, of course you have it. But at that time, nonprofits didn't do that as much. So we were, you know, using sort of this new technology. But like the first year, our budget was like $5,000. And then we realized we needed to sue the city because the city was the main opposition and a
Yeah.
group of property owners. And the other thing that's ironic is the property owners that ultimately made the most money were the one fighting to tear it down because they
Wow.
felt like it was stopping development.
Oh, like the buildings that
The people that own
wait.
property underneath.
Yeah.
So example, see where the standard is now,
Yeah.
that wasn't there.
Okay.
And so there's a property owner that
Yeah.
owned property on either side
Yeah.
underneath, and he owned air rights above it.
Oh.
So
Okay.
that building is really expensive to build because there's
Yeah.
a big hole in it.
Yeah.
So like he wanted to tear
He
it
didn't
down
want to
so
tear
he
it
could
down.
build a
That would
normal
make it
hotel.
a lot easier.
Now it made him more money this way, but at the
course.
time there were 22 property owners that had
Okay.
this thing on their property. So they wanted, and then they looked at us and they said, "Where are you getting the money?" I don't know. "What is your vision?" I don't know.
Okay.
How you don't own this? How are you going to get ownership? I don't know.
Mhm.
Like, you know, some real. Again, I always like to. I mean, we would fight against the property owners, but they weren't dumb. Like they weren't.
Okay.
You know, and we loved Giuliani turned out to be helpful for us because everyone hated him even then.
Mm.
And so if no one cared about our project, we could say Giuliani hates it. And they're like, "Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
happy
See, that's the sales right
I'm
there.
happy
You're
to
good.
give money, you know."
good.
And so that, you know, so we started out, again, it wasn't like we were raising money to build it.
Mhm.
We were raising money for a brochure. Then we had to raise money for a lawsuit. Then we had to raise money for an exhibition.
Okay.
So the other thing that helped keep me not being like, how are we going to do this whole thing,
Yeah.
was like each year we had like a small goal. Like,
Mhm.
okay, this year we're going to do a brochure. This year we're going to make a website. This year we're going to file a lawsuit. This year we're going to have an
okay.
exhibition. So it wasn't like this year we're going to build it. Like we knew, I mean, at the time we thought it was like going to take 4 years. Turns out it took 10 years.
Wow.
So that's the other thing that sort of helps is all the things you don't know.
No, that's so interesting because I feel like we're living in a time where it's like the microwave society where people just want things instantly.
Yeah.
And to hear your story when you was like 10 years,
Yeah.
this year, website. Most people want things in 6 months, 3 months, maybe even tomorrow.
Yeah.
But to hear like your story and to actually see this, it's okay to wait the process,
Yeah.
right, and be patient.
I mean, if I'd known it was going to take 10 years and
You
cost
probably
this
would.
much money, I would have said, no,
You probably
I'm not
would.
going to do it. So that's what I mean. The things you don't know
Mm.
in some ways help you because you know, if you knew, I was watching that movie about the World War II bombers. This is a new show. And the guy goes up there for the first time and he's shot at. And when he comes down, he said, "Why didn't you tell me that it was going to be this bad?" And he said, "Because you wouldn't have gone."
Oh, wow.
And so it's sort of, if you'd known how long it was going to take. But yeah, so I think in the digital world, you can build things quickly.
Mhm.
You can build a whole digital world. You can build all kinds of things, you know, very quick. But in the physical world,
Yeah.
it just takes a long time.
Mhm.
Anything in New York takes a long time. Like, there's bureaucracy, there's laws, there's rules. And in some ways, that helps you because when when we just started out, when I was 29, we wouldn't have known how to manage this. We didn't know what to build.
Yeah.
We didn't have people support. So by taking the time, it allowed us to grow a group of supporters. It also allowed us to learn. You know, at the end of that 10 years, the city let us manage this because we had learned so much in that past 10 years. You know, no matter how much, I mean, even if we had ChatGPT, you can't learn that in a year. So there's some things that do take just longer. If you want to physically build things, it takes time.
And I have a 2-part question.
Yeah.
When did you know, like, all right, we made this, like, we're doing it?
I was gonna ask, that's good. Like, what was that moment where you was like, oh, okay, we arrived?
And then the second one is like, when did you know, like, all right, I'm leaving my job?
Yeah. So the first one, again, I said I'm a dreamer, but I'm a realist. So I knew after a while, I knew all the problems that we had. So like, I thought the whole thing could fail, until the day we opened. Because I didn't tell people that. But there were lawsuits against us, we didn't have all the money, so each step, there were so many problems, it wasn't like I thought we made it. And then another thing, even when we open, are people gonna wanna walk 3 stories up? I live in a 3-story walk up. People complain coming to my apartment, you know? That's high. Do people wanna go off the street? Are the plants all gonna die? We only have this much soil. You know, are all the plants gonna die because it heats and cools it's not a great environment. Are people gonna throw things off at people on the street? Is it gonna be safe?
Yeah.
So we just didn't know all those things, and we thought maybe 300,000 people would come. That's when you get projections and you sort of inflate them a little bit. Those were our inflated projections of what we thought people would come in the first year. And the first year we had 1 million people. And then, now, I don't know what it was last year, but maybe 7 million or something. It became much more successful than we ever thought. And interestingly, the problems that we had, and I can talk about sort of some of the failures, is of over-success. Something you don't really plan for.
What do you mean by that?
Is that like quick success?
Yeah, so 2 things. One, again, remember the property owners were fighting us?
Yeah.
And, we were trying to convince them, it's going to be good for the neighborhood, good for property values. It became so good for property values that it created a kind of gentrification that it was almost like the fastest gentrification New York had ever seen.
Yeah.
And so it's good for property owners.
Yes, of course.
It turned out for the opponents got the most value.
Yeah.
It's good for the city, like the city government, because they get more tax revenues. It's a mixed bag for the people that live in the neighborhood. Now, not in a lot of cases, gentrification happens when there's a lot of low-income housing. In this case, where the High Line ran, it was mostly commercial, so there wasn't a lot of housing. And most of the low-income housing was public housing. So that isn't going to be forced out. And the people that were sort of forced out were more like middle income. When your rent was $2,000 and it went up to $3,000, which is bad, but they can afford to go somewhere else. The other disadvantage was people's stores. There was a lot of different stores in this neighborhood than now. There was a lot of stores that weren't so expensive. Now you walk down 10th Avenue, it's like
yes. It's like Fifth Avenue.
It's like it's a very expensive street, and so whereas people used to have neighborhood stores, a lot of those got pushed out. Now the neighborhood's safer, the neighborhood's cleaner, so there are some advantages. The other biggest mistake or failure was we did a lot of community input with different groups, and we knew there's 2 NYCHA, which is public housing, New York City Housing Authority housing in the neighborhood. And so we knew those were 2 communities that we wanted to involve. We actually moved our offices into the Hudson Guild. So we had offices in, one of the developments. And we did a lot of community input there, but people didn't really care because it's hard to say something that might happen, you know, it's just like very theoretical.
Yeah.
And it was a whole bunch of white people. I'd never gone in any night show. I'd never been to the Hudson Guild. And so, and none of us had done any community input. None of us were from there. We were almost all white. We were all white.
Yeah.
And so when we opened, we noticed the Highline wasn't very diverse. And anecdotally, you didn't feel like people were coming from some people from the neighborhood. So we did a survey in a year after we opened of people in NYCHA, and the results were pretty simple. They said they didn't hate the Highline, they just didn't come. And when we asked why they didn't come, there was 3 reasons. They said it wasn't built for us, they don't see people that look like them, and they didn't like our programs. So we couldn't do anything about how it was built, because it was built.
Yeah.
You couldn't do anything about what people look like, because that just makes it more, you know, how do you get people, if it's just going to make it self-perpetuating. So they didn't like our program. So, and we also asked people, what kind of programs do you want? One of the things people said is they'd like jobs for teens. So one of the things we did is we created Highline Teens, a program for teens in the neighborhood that then created their own programs.
Okay.
So we were deciding honestly, the programs were things I wanted. Because, you know, that's what I thought, I didn't know better. And so when we started having teens come up with their programming, they could come up with what movies they want, what events do they want.
Okay.
And then they invited their friends, they invited their families, and we asked other programs. We started doing, one of the requests we got was for a salsa night. We started bringing salsa musicians from all over the city, from different neighborhoods. That attracted people from neighborhoods all over the city. Like, so a certain neighborhood would come if their musicians were playing. And so it gradually started changing, and the Highline got more diverse over time. But the mistake was we could have done a better job before we opened. And it's really about hiring someone that knows how to do community input rather than a whole bunch of people that are doing other things that community input was always secondary, a third important. It wasn't
number one.
Yeah, to us, like, the design was the most important.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the gentrification, once you create value, it's very hard to get it back. So once a neighborhood's expensive,
There's no turning back.
there's no turning back. I mean, like, then it's too expensive. You can't buy property.
Yeah.
You can't. And so what you need to do is the government, you really need to partner with the city to do zoning to create more affordable housing or create job development programs. And the city did some of it. There's, I think, of the new housing, I think 1/4 of it is affordable housing in some of these developments. Yeah. But if we had known it was going to be so successful, we could have gotten more. So, I mean, it's hard to know in retrospect, but so it's those are the 2 things, the capturing the value, and for the Highline itself, like, the Highline now doesn't get any city money. It doesn't get money from all the people that made a lot of money. Like, the Highline doesn't benefit, and it just means more people come, which makes it more expensive to operate. So again, if you were gonna do it over, is create more money for affordable housing and money to just run the thing.
Yeah.
So it benefits from the value it creates. And then going to what was your other question? Oh, why did I leave? Why did I want to
So
leave?
like, when did you know, like, all right, I could leave my job now? And then what changed for you? Because I know at first you were saying, like, it was kind of like, oh, see how this goes.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh, this is it now.
Yeah.
Like, how was that?
Well, I knew I became a full-time job after like 3 years. For a while, I was doing consulting to like pay my bills, and so I found jobs that paid pretty well, but I didn't have to work that many hours, so I could do this. And then gradually, I started being paid here, and I made enough to quit my other jobs, and it was like the best. It turned out it was like the best job ever. You know, and I loved it. I was like, it combined all the things that it didn't necessarily have skills in, but that I loved doing. You know, I love learning about like architecture, city planning, design, real estate, all of those things, art. And so I loved it, but I always knew sometimes founders stay until they die. You know, like some organizations are run by people for years. And often when they die, the organization has a hard time because it's built all around that person. Or that person can raise all the money and other people don't have to. And really like the board or the people in the organization sometimes depend on that person to do something. And I knew I didn't want it for the High Line and I didn't want it for me. And so I actually left 3 years after we opened the first time. And then they hired someone to replace me. It didn't work. I came back temporarily and then I fell in love with it again because of all these different problems that were happening. And so that's when we started the High Line Network to teach other projects not to make the mistake. Most people think there's a network of other infrastructure reuse projects around the country. I think there's like 60 of them now. And most people think we started it to teach them how to do it.
Okay.
But no one really wants to hear about your successes.
Yeah.
They want to hear about your problems, your failures. And so that's why we really created it, to help other people not make the same mistake. And so I loved working on that. The other problem is it became really successful. A lot of people came and it became really expensive to operate. So we needed to grow the organization. We had started High Line Art, which was also really interesting. So I left, I came back, and I realized I maybe had left too early. And the reason it didn't work for the person that came was it just was dependent on Josh and I to raise the money. And so I wanted then to create an organization that wasn't, dependent on Josh or I. And then I basically knew I just wanted to do something else, but it was hard. I stayed probably longer than I thought because it was hard to find a job as interesting. I knew I could make more if I worked in the private sector. And I had a kid when I was old at 50, and now I have 2 kids. And so I also wanted to make more money and just do something. I didn't want to die here. I mean, it's a great place to die. I mean, I'd be happy to do this my whole life in some ways, but I was like, if I don't leave now, when I'm 50, it's going to be harder to leave when I'm 60.
True.
Like,
So you got Go ahead.
So with leaving, because when you said that, because like for me, if I leave my job, I got to put a 2 weeks notice.
Yeah.
What was that process for you?
I mean, the first time I left, I gave 1 year notice. The second time, I was like, good. I'm not doing that. Yeah. And I gave like 5 months notice.
Okay.
And it was great because Joshua, the other founder, had left. He agreed to come back while they looked for someone else.
Okay.
So it actually worked really well because they had a founder come back who knew how to do it. Yeah. So it worked well for the High Line. And then they took a year to hire Alan, who is the new executive director.
And you're still the founder, so what exact role did you step
I was executive director, which means, I ran it, with Josh. That was the official role. That's the role that Alan has now. Okay. And so I'm co-founder, but I don't have any, and I completely stepped away. I'm not on the board. This is my first time in this office in months and months. Wow. Maybe a year.
Wow.
So, which I think is good because you don't need the old guy coming back and saying you should do it this way. Mm-hmm. And would I do it exactly how they're doing it? No. But are they probably doing some things better? Definitely. I think one of the things that when Alan came in, he was like, the planting is good, but it's actually not as good as it was. And he really has invested in making, because that's the heart of it. Mm-hmm. And I just sort of, I think, it was great, and we had great gardeners, but we hadn't really invested in enough gardeners and enough, so you really put resources into that till I think, and so now when I go up there, I'm like, wow, it looks better.
Yeah. So Kofi had told me that you're into meditation. I've seen it online. what role does that play in you working on the Highline and in your just creative process in your life?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't learn meditation to be more creative. I learned meditation because I had a lot of anxiety.
Okay.
You know, and I think I had a lot of anxiety when I was a kid. And then when I moved to New York, it got worse. Not because of New York, but, you know, life's harder after college. You know, like I had more pressure, and I would go to bed exhausted, and then I'd put my head on my pillow, and my mind would explode with anxiety. And I couldn't sleep, and all through my 20s, and I tried a lot of things. Therapy, medication. I tried drinking too much. That wasn't helpful. Therapy and medication, more helpful. But I still, and as much as I say I was okay with the Highline being, it was very stressful. It was still stress. Even though I'm good at sales, I'm okay at rejection. I was very stressed out, and I was really. A friend of mine did this thing where he videotaped me.
Yeah.
He's a coach,
Yeah.
and he videotaped me in the Hudson Guild, in a closet in Hudson Guild. I'll never forget. He videotaped with a VHS recorder, and then he played back the interview. And I looked at myself, and I was so sad.
Yeah.
I was like, smile. And every once in a while I would smile and be like, yes! And then I would just go, and I just looked so sad.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want, you know, and so I thought meditation would help. And I tried a whole bunch of different kinds, but I couldn't sit still. Anxiety made it hard to so I couldn't meditate for more than 5 minutes. I could do it in class, but I went home, I was like, I hate this. But I kept trying. And so finally, I learned this technique called Vedic meditation, where it's a mantra base, where you think a mantra inside. And for whatever reason, I was able to do that for 20 minutes twice a day. And so I learned right before we opened the Highline. And I started doing it twice a day. And I was embarrassed to tell anyone I was meditating. So I would say I had a call to make, and I would go in the closet every day at 4 o'clock in our old offices. And they were like, we know you're meditating. Just you can tell us you're meditating. You're the boss. But I was still embarrassed that I was not working for 30 minutes. You know, I would go in there and not be on email. And then I was like, okay, I love this. You know, who wants to learn to meditate?
Yeah.
I'll pay for it for the Highline will pay for it. And then no one wanted to learn.
Really?
But later, a lot of people learned because they saw I got nicer in the office. Which is not why I learned, but I did get, people think I'm really nice because I'm a nice friend and I look really friendly and I seem really nice. If you were around me, I was not that nice of a boss. I mean, I can be
pre-meditation.
I was gonna say about I could just be a dick at work.
I can imagine because there's so much.
I
got a lot of pressure.
Yeah. So I didn't become super nice at work. I became nicer at work. But the most important thing is I was just I didn't have no anxiety, but I didn't even sleep better when we opened the Highline, but I was a little bit happy. And so that's what kept me doing it. I don't really like doing my meditation. You know, some people love it and they see colors and it's they describe all this stuff, and I don't know, my meditation's super boring. I close my eyes and I have a lot of thoughts, but I feel a little bit better afterwards. And then gradually I started sleeping better. And so when I left the Highline the first time, I went to India to learn to teach meditation, and now I consider it now my first job, even though I do it less now because with the kids and my new job. But so it didn't. I don't think the Highline didn't happen because I was meditating. But it's mainly I've been able to enjoy more of the Highline's success and every year I can enjoy it more and more. Even a few years after we opened, people would be like, wow, you did something great. Or I'd be at dinner and I could overhear someone talking about going to the Highline, or people would ask me directions to the Highline. And it just didn't sink in for me. I was still worried about how we were going to raise money for the next part, or and so I think that if I think of the best and now I'm probably a nicer dad too because of meditating. But that's one of the things for me personally. And again, because I'm at heart pretty selfish, it just makes me enjoy my life. Not every day, but more.
My first time meditating was here. So
Yeah.
he was my first person I meditated with. And I remember you asked us at work, and I was like, what's going on? Because I didn't know how to meditate.
Yeah.
So I came, and I was like, well, I'm tired, so... And I was nervous because one time, I'm going to tell you this, one time I fell asleep during meditating.
Yeah.
And I told one of the interns, I was like, I'm embarrassed. I think I snored a second. It was like, no, like that means you're relaxed.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And often people think they're asleep, they're just in deep rest. And so, and if you fall asleep, I mean, that was the thing I learned. It was helpful for me actually to be public about meditating. Because if the boss is embarrassed to meditate, how is anybody else going to meditate?
Yeah.
And so we used to have a 4:00 meditation in my office.
That's beautiful. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that idea because I'm into the same thing. I work with a nonprofit organization with kids,
Yeah.
teaching about meditation practices, and I feel like that's something that's needed in the workspace, school, everything. I think is something that needs to be more popular around.
And if you could learn it early,
Mm-hmm.
so much more rather than waiting. I was 40, when I learned, so I had 30 years.
And you said you went to India. Too.
I went to India to learn to teach it, but you don't need to go to learn to India to learn meditation.
How was that experience? That's interesting.
It was interesting. It was like it was hard. We were meditating for like 14 hours a day. It was. It didn't really matter that you were in India because you were just sort of meditating.
Yeah.
But you could have. But it was great. It was it's still my favorite thing to teach.
Yeah.
Teaching is fun for me. My meditation, that's the other thing that I like to tell people. Some people love to be in meditation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like delicious, and it's like, again, mine is just like, if I didn't know it helped me afterwards, I wouldn't do it. I'd rather watch The Bear.
Yeah.
I don't, but I know it helps me. I do it for the other time, not the sitting there time, so.
So, something you said when I interned, you was like, use us because we're using you.
Yeah.
And I was confused. I'm like, they're using me? Like, what do they mean? And you was like, book time with certain people with different roles, make sure you take advantage. And I actually want to ask you, from your perspective, how did you view it in that way? Like where did that kind of like start for you? Like, were you like to even say that in a way? Like,
Because so many people helped me. So many people helped me. And I have this mentor, a guy named Phil Aarons. I swear, I think he's enlightened. He's like a real estate developer. Doesn't look, wears the suit, just sort of this regular guy. But he was my first board chair. And I overheard, he helped a lot of nonprofits. And Ann Pasternak, who runs the Brooklyn Museum, she used to run Creative Time, and he was on her board. And I overheard him saying, I like the stuff Creative Time does, but I don't really care about that. I like helping you realize your vision. And he was saying, and I think Ann was a little offended that she heard him say he didn't like what Creative Time, which was not what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
What I heard is, oh, yeah, he doesn't, because he used to say, I probably want him to come up on the High Line if we do this.
Mm-hmm.
But he was putting so much time helping me. And I realized he was getting joy out of helping me. And so the more I asked for help, the happier he was. And I'm not as nice as him. He's much nicer. He's smarter. And that's what I mean. He doesn't meditate, but I think he has a enlightened mindset because he helps so many people. But and then so many people, remember, I didn't have any of the experience. So all these people, thousands of people helped me do this. So they gave me that. And you realize people enjoy, even the people when you ask for money and they give you money, they like giving you. It makes them happy.
No,
it's nice to have money to be able to give. It makes you realize, I have something to give. So, and it's much more fun, answering some advice or connecting with someone than your own job. Like your own job is still like a job. Helping someone else with their job is like much easier. And, you know, but I think what's interesting about you, I said that to every Highline teen group. Here's my email, robert@thehighline.org, 917-523-5194, text me. I would say it wasn't 1%, but you know, very few people. And again, it's hard. Like, I'm the boss.
Yeah.
These people are teens.
What do I ask for?
They're like, you know, what? Or I don't want to email you. Like, I don't want to, you know, like, I don't, you know. But you know, I loved it when people reached out, and you've continued. Like, you reached out, and you were persistent. Yeah. Like you said, come on my podcast. Maybe I didn't respond to the first email. You sent me another email. I said, okay. I made an appointment. I canceled. You made another one. And, you know, it's that persistence. And there were just several people that have done that. And it's like, it makes me really happy. It's fun to see people, their careers develop, them do things. And it connects you to the Highline, which is good for the Highline, because it also shows this team program is actually helpful. Because at the end of the day, this I mean, I don't want to. The skills you learn in Highline Teen, like learning about horticulture, learning about city planning, I don't know if that's going to help you in your career unless you go into those careers. But what it helps you is gives you confidence, a network. The other thing that like you and other people did was you would send an email to thank me. No one thanks the boss. It's actually good advice for everyone. And again, you don't do it selfishly. You don't need to help the boss. I mean, the boss should be helping you, but the boss remembers the people that send an email saying thank you, because literally no one. Again, don't feel bad for the boss. The boss is paid, and they're paid, and they get to be the boss. But it is really good for your career. Like, and then when you send them a LinkedIn and said, "Oh, can you serve a reference?" Even if they don't remember what you did, they're like, "Oh, this guy's a good guy," you know, because he thanked me. And it just shows. And people should do it not just as a team. I mean, it works. You know, my boss. At Christmas, I wrote him a letter and thanked him for hiring me, thanking him for and I believe it. I really am grateful for it. But it's a really good career move. And staying in touch, letting your boss know after you've left, what you're doing. You know, people think, oh, they don't want to hear from me. They don't care. And maybe they don't. But they're not going to be mad at you for sending an email saying, "Oh, I got a new job." I mean, or sending them a LinkedIn thing, said, "Hey, by the way, whatever." People like to see people doing things. So, so it's really the answer is people did it for me, it's enjoyable doing.
Pouring back into the well. So in this part, before we close, it's called Conversations with Your Younger Self. What is 3 pieces of advice that you would give to your younger self?
I mean, it's like, again, when I looked at that video of myself and, I was so sad. And I had an easy life. Like, I grew up in like a upper middle class family, had just a lot of advantages. I was smart. When I applied myself, I got things, but I was not happy. And so, I don't know, you can't tell, it's worse to tell someone to be happy because you can't do it. I guess the thing is just I kept trying different things, and a lot of things, glad I did them and still do. I have to do a lot of things to not have anxiety and to be happy. Like it's not just meditation. I have to do a whole bunch of things. I'm just trying to find a new coach because I realize at 54 I still need some work coaching. And so I guess it was just like keep trying. And it's not one thing. There's no one thing. Meditation doesn't answer everything. Coaching doesn't answer everything, but it's often a combination of things. And so it really would be just keep trying. learned to meditate earlier, but I tried
Mm-hmm.
different techniques, when I was much younger. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just keep. It can get better. Like it's gotten better for me. I'm far happier now at 50 than I was at 40, 30, 20.
Beautiful. Man, thank you. This was
Thank you. This was fun for me. It brought me back. I hadn't thought about that video cassette. Of me looking so sad. I still have it.
Yeah.
I've brought it with me everywhere. Like I still have that video cassette. And now this makes me sort of want to go get it converted.
Yeah.
And see what
And
that
see it,
video
and
looks
see you
like.
now at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow.
In the closet in Hudson Guild.
Oh man, so thank you guys for tuning in to another episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. What's happening with you guys? We out of here.
Hi, I'm Robert Hammond. I'm one of the co-founders of The Highline, and I'm on Spark the Brain podcast. And you can watch it on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. Spark the Brain.